Thank you very much, dear friends, dear Mr. Shailendra Singh. Happy to see you today with us, Professor Mujal. So it's always a pleasure that you support our endeavors in whatever the history and the how we respect the history from the point of view of today's reality. That's always very important. And actually, I would like to focus today on the consequences of that events which happened 80 years ago, which brought us today as we are. And these lessons which we brought from the Second World War, that they're very relevant today. So, and my contribution would be a bit of from a diplomatic perspective of the contemporary reality based on the lessons which we had 8 years ago. And where on the 22nd of June 1941, the Nazi Germany unleashed the war against the Soviet Union, and as was mentioned, it's well known that that was the most bloody and cruel events in the human history, which in Russia is known as the Great Patriotic War. The Victory Day, which is the most celebrated festival in Russia, marked on the 9th of May, when in 1945, the Soviet troops captured the Nazis' headquarters in Berlin, is the centerpiece of the Soviet and Russian political, social, and cultural life. That the memory of that war constitute an institutional ground for the Russian society today. Our memory of heroism and sacrifice of the Soviet people who saved the planet against fascism remains very strong in our hearts. Overall, we had lost 27 million people, and we will never forget millions of innocent lives, including children, burnt villages, devastated cities, starvation, refugees, crimes against humanity, victims of concentration camps. That was the case of the Nuremberg Tribunal in 1945, which brought to justice high-ranking Nazi officials who stood behind the mass terror, bloody killings, enslavement, and purposeful extermination of entire nations. The victory in the Great Patriotic War was crucial for the Second World War, which put an end to the German Nazism and Japanese militarism. The events preceding to the Second World War are well known. A lack of collective responsibility, dominance of narrow-minded and geopolitically motivated approaches became a fertile soil for unilateral aggressive actions. The British conservatives, rather than joining hands for peace with the USSR to thwart Nazi aggressive plans in Europe, adopted a policy of appeasement of Adolf Hitler. The aim was to channel the German aggression to the east, towards the Soviet Union. In 1938, these sordid intentions resulted in London and Paris signing the infamous Munich Agreement. Thus, the countdown to the war began. Now we have the Universal Organization, the United Nations, established in 1945, which is regulating issues of global peace and security. This is the major gain of the Second World War. Atrocities of the war gave us lessons of how to maintain international relations. And unfortunately, some countries now try to misplace these lessons by deliberate distortions and falsifications of the Second World War events, especially the shameless attempts to rehabilitate and even glorify Nazi criminals and their supporters. The European Parliament, for example, has accused the USSR, along with Nazi Germany, of unleashing the Second World War. In the Baltic states and in Ukraine, cherishing Waffen-SS and so-called nationalism heroes who helped the Nazis is quite popular. The US, along with Ukraine, are voting against the Russia-sponsored United Nations General Assembly annual resolution against the glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism, and other forms of contemporary racism. This resolution is co-sponsored by India and other like-minded countries. Moreover, under the pretext of the so-called Russian threat, some countries in the Eastern Europe try to get more economic support from their patrons. But sometimes they go too far, even devastating monuments established in honor of the Soviet soldiers and generals who sacrificed their lives liberating these countries from the fascist aggression. The problem is that now some countries are preoccupied with geostrategic ideas of how to preserve their exclusiveness and domination. It means that the Second World War lessons are less and less respected. We see the growing global military presence in those countries and of those countries and their interference in domestic affairs. Along the recent examples are the devastation of former Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, illegal military presence in Syria, deployment of nuclear weapons in non-nuclear states. In order to justify their actions, they use various unappropriated pretexts. It's a fashion of time to blame Russia for everything, while Russia became an unavoidable factor in their domestic policies. Thanks to it, political parties are winning elections, defense ministries and industries are getting more and more funds. Military blocs like NATO are getting the purpose. For example, the military budget of the US is exceeding $700 billion. It's about 20 times higher than in Russia. Russia is ready to respond to any threat to its national security. However, the Soviet and Russian foreign policy after the Second World War has been focused to maintain the central role of the United Nations, its charter and international law, emphasizing the principles of resolution of conflicts by peaceful means, mutual respect, non-interference in domestic affairs, collective approach, and dialogue. It's time for everyone to employ a responsible approach to avoid appeasing a global policeman. Nobody will save, while global dictators don't have friends. They feel uncomfortable when other powers behave in a way they don't want. It's a well-known prediction that the Third World War would mean devastation of the human civilization due to the level of the modern technologies. That is why such imperatives as to collectively and peacefully resolve conflicts, to adopt universally binding rules prohibiting weaponization of outer space, to promote responsible behavior with regard to the use of ICTs, non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, become especially vital today. We invite all countries to stay united against double standards and hidden geopolitical agendas. There shouldn't be any space for any illegal unilateral actions and illegitimate extraterritorial sanctions, which undermine strategic and regional stability, spread uncertainty and unpredictability in global affairs. Cooperation should unite rather than divide, while attempts to undermine the Second World War lessons are detrimental to global security. We consider India as a priority partner in these endeavors. Our global and regional approaches are similar or coinciding. In the framework of the United Nations, G20, BRICS, SCO, etc., together we stand for the establishment of the truly multipolar, just and equal world order. We proudly recall that in 1941 and 1942, societies of France of the Soviet Union were set up here in India. We remember the Indian contingent, which heroically supplied the Red Army through Persia. And in 1944, two sons of India were decorated with highest military award of this USSR, the Order of Red Star. We were happy to welcome Defense Minister Rajnath Singh in Moscow last June, who participated in the events dedicated to the victory in the Great Patriotic War and led the Indian Three Forces contingent for the Jubilee Red Square parade. it's a duty of the international community to safeguard the Second World War lessons. And we believe that today's event is a strong contribution in this regard. Thank you very much for your kind attention.